and had soon realized how many people needed extra tuition in this area. So they got together to write a collection of notes and leaflets, which soon turned into a full-colour magazine, Knitting Machine Digest.
Fine, thank you.
Well, 12 issues on, and with a circulation which has grown to around 8,000, Hazel and Christine are beginning to find themselves really bogged down in the time-consuming paperwork which goes with publishing any successful magazine.
After the first 2 or 3 issues, it was quite easy for us to remember what had been in the magazine. But now if we were to have a phone call and somebody would like to say, we've seen a sock pattern in your magazine, we'd like that particular issue, which one was it, please? It then involves us searching through the back issues to see exactly which one the socks were in. We do keep them on record separate from the magazine, but they're all in boxes and files and they're all cross-referenced, and it's very difficult to go straight to what you want, especially if somebody's waiting on the telephone. Subscriptions are never straightforward. At the moment, we make out a record card and then we make them out 5 more labels to cover the rest of the year. But then halfway through the year, somebody will change their subscription. They want to move house and give us their change of address, and it means searching through each of the files and changing each one manually. Whereas we feel if it was recorded on a computer, we'll be able to get to the information straight away and change it very quickly.
We send out an invoice, then you wait, and then you have to send out a statement, then you have to send out a restatement, and it takes an awful lot of time and chasing and following up. And we feel that with the computer, quicker, B, it would be much safer because we'd know exactly where we were.
But is a computer really the best answer to all these problems? Surely it would be much simpler to employ an...
For a small business, one of its advantages, its main advantage over a large concern, is that it is able to turn around an idea quickly. If we were to employ somebody else, it would be very difficult to find somebody who knew what we were talking about, both in machine knitting terms and in terms of the magazine.
But while deciding to buy a computer is one thing, finding the right sort of machine to suit one's needs is quite a different matter.
First of all, we looked at the magazines, but we didn't find them very helpful because they assumed you knew what they were talking about, and we hadn't got a clue.
We feel we might have made a mistake in talking to sort of friends about computers, because one person who uses one particular type of computer obviously thinks that's great, but if there was somewhere where you could tell them exactly what you needed and then they could assure you that not only suited you now, but would suit you as the business grew, because hopefully this business is going to grow and grow, and if it grows at the rate that it has done over the last 2 years, then we don't want to buy a computer that in a couple of years' time.
Well, that's an example of a very small business in a fairly common situation. They've identified problem areas in their business, in their case subscriptions, accounting and some sort of information retrieval. Well, with me today is Colin Harris of the NCC Microsystems Centre in London, whose job it is to give advice to businesses about micros and their software. Colin, what advice would you give in this case?
Well, before I give any advice at all, I'd like to clear up 3 specific items. First of all, I'd like to make certain that I understood fully what was being asked. Secondly, I'd like to be clear in my own mind that the problem could and should be handled by a microcomputer. And thirdly, I'd like to make certain that in my mind again, it was economically viable. Now, in this particular instance, I would regard using a proprietary information retrieval system as being a very good answer. This would cope quite adequately with 3 of the major things that they've mentioned. First of all, there's the subscription accounting and the ability to transfer a mailing list onto a machine and produce labels automatically. Secondly, there were the questions that they were being asked about what patterns were in what particular issues. And thirdly, the advice they were asked to give as to whether a training centre or club was available in certain areas. I believe that this particular type of situation lends itself very much to a package of that type.
And using a package, you'd be able to get it up that much more quickly than writing it with an ordinary program.
Certainly, and in fact we did just that in the Microsystems Centre, and if we look at the screen here we'll see an example of what we did. We tested out the subscription situation, and in the top left-hand corner here of the name and address of a particular subscriber. If we move down to the bottom on the left, we can see elements there of when they joined, what the subscription amount is, and whether or not it's been paid recently. The top right, we have details here of the machines that are owned by this particular subscriber. And finally, on the bottom right, we have the most important things of all as far as we're concerned, which are the details of what club night is being run, when the time of a particular training session is being achieved. We took perhaps 2.5 hours, that's all, to set up within the particular package that we're talking about the details of this particular requirement.
And how long would it have taken you if you'd have written it in, say, BASIC or some language like that?
Well, that's very difficult to assess, of course, but I would imagine that it would be 2, 3, or perhaps even 4 weeks to successfully accomplish what we managed to do in 2.5 hours.
And then there's all the problems of updating it and changing it when you're finished.
Certainly, and one of the beauties about this particular package, this piece of software, or this program, is that it is very easy for the users to be able to change it. Once they become more familiar with its use, they may decide that they want certain elements changed. It's very simple for them to learn to change it themselves.
And what equipment did you recommend?
Well, equipment was fairly straightforward and simple to recommend. We decided that they would need a screen with a keyboard naturally. They'd need the computer with 2 disk drives and obviously a printer for producing their subscription lists and also their name and address labels. We felt that that should easily be contained within a figure of £3,000 to £4,000.
And was it an economic proposition going to your third area? Was it an economic
To my mind, it was an economic proposition, otherwise I wouldn't have carried it forward. But I must leave this decision to the client. This is the decision they have to make, whether in their view, with my advice and with the advantages and disadvantages that I feel the system would provide, they have to decide finally whether it was economically viable for them.
It sounds almost miraculous that you're able to do something in 2.5 hours. And that excludes, of course, setting up all their files of their 8,000 subscribers, but do it in 2.5 hours when programming would take 3 weeks. What are the limitations?
Well, there are 2 major limitations with this system. First of all of the information with regard to one subscriber, shall we say, has to be contained within the size of one screen. Secondly, the number of subscribers, in this case we only have 8,000, but the number of subscribers would be limited under this system to 65,000.
So they've got plenty of room for expansion from 68 to 64.
Yes, indeed they have. But the advantage with this, although it isn't a disadvantage in this case, there are no mathematical capabilities associated with this particular package. We can't add, multiply, divide, etc. This is purely an information retrieval package.
Well, thanks a lot, Colin. Well, in this case, a commercial package was used, but there is another way.
Patrick Eager is a professional photographer who specialises in providing cricket photographs for clients around the world. Back in the office, he uses a micro to help with the day-to-day jobs of running a photographic business. Jobs like of which client has which photograph, and printing the delivery notes, captions and reminders that go out with each batch of photos. Interestingly enough, the software that does all this, he wrote himself.
Get any commercial software?
With several reasons.